everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing very well today. So firstly, I just want to say, if you can hear my husband talking, he is gaming. So I have asked him to quiet it down just a little bit, but just an FYI, if you hear some muffled voices, that is what that is. But anyways, today's video, I got this video idea from It's Just Stuff here on YouTube. I have talked about her a couple of times here on my channel before. I just really enjoy her content. I feel like she does a lot of eyeshadow palette content, and I still am someone who really enjoys eyeshadow, and I do purchase quite a few new eyeshadow palettes every single, I would say, like few months. And so I still get very excited about eyeshadow, and she does too. And so I have really found her content to be just very enjoyable and so much fun to watch. So she recently came out with a video about eyeshadow palettes that she could never declutter. Now, I know that there are obviously going to be some obvious palettes that I'm going to mention, or that I could mention in this video, but I just want to do a blanket statement. I could never declutter any of my Natasha Denona palettes, obviously, right? I feel like I'm a broken record at this point. I don't want to even mention any of the Natasha Denona palettes because that is just very repetitive. It's very obvious. I would never declutter a Natasha Denona palette, okay? Secondly, I could never declutter any of my indie palettes. So none of my Unearthly palettes, Bella Beauty bar palettes, not my Adept, nothing like that, okay? So I just want to state that and put that out there because I'm not going to be mentioning, there's one particular Natasha Denona palette that I'm going to mention in today's video, but I'm not going to be talking about all of my Natasha Denona palettes because obviously I would not declutter those because those are some of my prized possessions. As y'all know, she has one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas in the entire world. So let's go ahead and get started. These palettes are going to be palettes that either are very special to me, or maybe they have a sense of nostalgia for me, and because of that, I don't see myself decluttering them at all. Some of these may be very old, and I may not put them on my eyes. I think actually all of these I could still put on my eyes, but maybe to you, some of these are very old that you wouldn't put them on your eyes, but I definitely keep them more for like memory's sake. So let's get into it. I feel like it was pretty obvious that I could not declutter any of my Too Faced Gingerbread palettes. I love these so much, and I still hold them near and dear to my heart. The first one that ever came out was the Gingerbread Spice palette. This was the very first one that Too Faced came out with, and it's kind of the one that started it all. And this still performs really well. I actually did wear this one earlier this year, well, just a few months ago, basically. But I am just so in love with these palettes. I feel like these color stories were very nice and warm and comforting, and I felt like they kind of set the tone for the holiday season, for the fall season, and every single time around this time of year, I looked forward to seeing what Too Faced was going to release. So this is Gingerbread Spice. I love this one. However, y'all probably know that my favorite is Gingerbread Extra Spicy. So this one has the gingerbread man and gingerbread woman, super cute. And then here we have the more spicy and warm toned kind of color story. This one is definitely my favorite out of the two. I still love Gingerbread Spice so much, but I could never declutter this. I mean, this is such good Too Faced quality, the Too Faced formula that we know and love, right? It's so good. I was not super involved in the makeup community whenever like the peach palette came out, or whenever of course like the chocolate bar palettes came out. Like I felt like I was more involved in the makeup community in like 2017, 2018. And so those palettes, while they are obviously very nostalgic to me, I don't have as much of like a hold on them as I do with these. So I could never declutter these. This one, the Gingerbread Spice, is very old. This is 6 years old, but it still performs okay. Obviously, some of the shadows are declining, but I still will never declutter these, and I just love them so much. So there is that one. Another one that I could never declutter is definitely the Urban Decay Naked palette. Now, I actually have the original Naked palette, not the one that I used, unfortunately. I was such a silly goose and got rid of those palettes, and I really wish I would have kept them just for nostalgia purposes, but my sister decluttered her original Naked palette to me, and so I do have that one, but this is the remastered version that came out this year, and I will never declutter this palette. This is just such a staple. It's such a classic in my opinion. I just feel like this is the neutral palette that started everything moving forward. I feel like this palette was part of the reason that I fell in love with makeup, and especially for the reason that I fell in love with eyeshadow. And so I feel like I have this eyeshadow palette to thank for inspiring me to create some beautiful eyeshadow looks and inspire me just to kind of play around with eyeshadow. So I will never declutter this palette. And now that Urban Decay has kind of like discontinued this and then re-released it and everything, I definitely need to make sure that I keep that one in my collection. Okay, then we have these two random palettes that I have from Colourpop, and these are the Animal Crossing and Colourpop little like quads here. So I have La Belle of the Ball as well as 5 Star Island, and I will never declutter these. First off, Isabelle is seriously one of the cutest characters ever. She's one of my favorite characters from Animal Crossing, or she probably is my favorite character from Animal Crossing, but she's one of my favorite just video game characters in general. And I also really love this little palette. I think it's so cute, but not only do I have fond feelings for this palette because of the fact that it's Animal Crossing and that it's Isabelle, but for the Barbie movie that came out last year in 2023, I brought this palette, and I think my sister and my aunt all used this palette. And so now I just look at this and it makes me so happy because this was all the like pink glitter shade that we threw on our lids that day. And so I just have fond memories of us getting ready in the bathroom and getting ready to go see such an iconic movie. So definitely would never get rid of this one. And then La Belle of the Ball is more of like a purpley, color story. This is not as special to me in my opinion, especially because Isabelle was my favorite character. But because this is Animal Crossing, and I played Animal Crossing back whenever it was on the Nintendo DS, I really want to play it on, what was it, like the GameCube. I know that they have one on GameCube, but I don't have a GameCube. But anyways, I just love Animal Crossing. I think it's such a cute little game, and I could never declutter these little quads from Colourpop. Then also from Colourpop, I could never declutter the Hocus Pocus Gather Around Sisters palette. This is such a special palette to me. Hocus Pocus is definitely such a good movie. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's my favorite Halloween movie anymore, but I still really enjoy this movie, this palette, and I do love the fact that the Sanderson sisters are right there as you open the palette, and then the color story is very, very beautiful. I use this every single year whenever Halloween comes around. During the month of October, I do have a Halloween like eyeshadow palette basket, and this is definitely one of the palettes that I think about whenever it comes to fall color stories as well as Halloween color stories and eyeshadow palettes. So this is definitely very treasured in my collection because it is very limited edition, and so I will never ever declutter this one. So such a classic from Colourpop. And then another Colourpop palette is the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer palette. Not only do I love this palette, like how cute it is, I also really enjoy watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer every single year, but this is such a high-performing palette from Colourpop. I am always so impressed whenever I play around with this palette. I can't believe that this is a more like affordable-ish palette, and I also really enjoy the color story. One of my favorite shades is this one right here, and I've created a more like cool toned look with this palette. I've also, of course, created more warm tones. I don't know if I have yet to play with the greens or the reds, but that's okay. This is just such a high performing palette, and I'm seriously just very, very impressed with this formula. And then of course it's a very limited edition, so I will always have this in my collection. Okay, so sticking with Colourpop, I might as well just knock it out of the way, but basically I could never declutter the Colourpop Mega palettes. Some reason I love the Mega palettes from Colourpop. I don't know what it is, but they just do such an amazing job at coming up with different color stories, especially for a 35 pan palette. And so really quickly, let me just show you the Mega palettes that I have in my collection. So this one is your golden, and this one looks like this. I want to say I got this one from TJ Maxx. Such a beautiful, beautiful color story. So this one is one of the ones that I have. Also, I think from TJ Maxx is Getting Fresh, and Getting Fresh is more of a spring slash kind of summer color story. Super pretty. I love the pops of greens in here, as well as like the beautiful corally tones. And then I also have Stone Cold Fox, which is definitely one of my favorites. I love this cool toned color story. It's just so beautiful. I love the gradient of cool toned neutrals in this one. So I have this one. I also need to use my Mega palettes so much more than I do. It's so sad. I also have Smoke and Roses, which definitely gives me like Natasha Denona retro vibes. And here you can see why. It has these beautiful kind of mauvey rosy tones. So there's that one. And then I also have Bare Necessities, which might be my favorite one because this one is just your staple neutral palette. It has some warm tones, but it's definitely more neutral, and it does have some of those mauvey tones as well. And then finally, I do have the Smoke and Hot palette, and I was very, very impressed with this one from Colourpop. I just felt like, yes, this is very warm toned, but I love the peachy and plummy tones that are in this palette. So all of the Mega palettes, for some reason, they are just so special to me. I feel like, again, Colourpop does such an amazing job at just coming up with such beautiful color stories for a 35 pan palette. Like, arguably, you would think that within a 35 shade palette, there would be repeats or it would be very redundant, things like that. But I feel like Colourpop does such an amazing job at actually having like colors that go really well with themselves or with each other, but they're also not too repeated. So I love these Mega palettes, and I actually don't think I could ever declutter any of these because they are just so well done. The only one I did declutter, so I'm literally eating my words here, but I did declutter I think it was the It's a Mood palette, which was another Mega palette from them. And the only reason I decluttered that one was because I did feel that the formula was not as good as these other Megas. So just throwing that out there. Okay, then I have two ABH palettes, and these are just classics from ABH, and this is the ABH that I really, really miss. So of course I could never declutter my ABH Sultry palette. This is just such a gem, and honestly, I could still use this. I actually used this around this time last year, and this is just such a gem still. I absolutely love the shade Rose Quartz. I think it's one of the most beautiful rose gold shades ever, as well as Cyborg, that really beautiful silver. So I could never declutter this one. This also still performs really well. And then in the same vein, I could never declutter my ABH Norvina palette. This is one of my favorite color stories of all time. I love purple, but I also love that there is a mix of neutrals in here, so you could play around with color, but you can also create some beautiful, just kind of neutral toned looks. So I could never declutter this one. I feel like this palette could potentially be like how I started playing with color, or how I started falling in love, especially with purple on the eyes. So I love this one. I could never get rid of it. So those are my two ABH palettes that I could never declutter. Then I have this really random one from MAC, and you probably, or some of you probably don't even know that I have this palette, and it's primarily because I really just use this as a collector's piece, and it is the MAC and Selena palette. This is the Me Siento Muy Excited palette. And first off, the packaging is beautiful. It looks like a bustier, which is obviously what she's very well known for wearing. And then the overlay is very, very cute. So it's actually a picture of her, and this is an overlay that goes over the shadows. And then here is what the eyeshadow palette looks like. So the eyeshadow palette is actually very well done in my opinion. I feel like these are all shades that she would wear. I feel like she would wear kind of like, you know, these neutrally tones, maybe a little bit of sparkle on the lids. So I could never declutter this one because, again, I am such a fan of Selena. I actually, you know, I wasn't even alive when she passed away. However, after she passed away, I feel like that's whenever she became more popular, at least in my family, and I grew up listening to her. And so she is just very special to me and to my family. And so because of that, I had to grab this collection. I feel like I'm not a huge fan of her family, to be honest, but I still wanted to have something Selena themed in my makeup collection. So I could never, ever declutter this one. Okay, then we have BH Cosmetics, and BH Cosmetics, RIP BH Cosmetics. They have such a great eyeshadow formula, and I'm seriously so sad that they're pretty much like not even a thing anymore. From what I've heard, Makeup Revolution has since purchased BH Cosmetics, but I feel like there's just not even a BH Cosmetics brand anymore, so I'm a little bit confused as to what's going on. I have heard that maybe Makeup Revolution is now using the BH Cosmetics eyeshadow formula because some of their palettes have gotten better over time, so who knows, right? But I thought I'd share with you my BH Cosmetics palette collection, and just to let you know that I could never declutter these. So this one was kind of one of their very last releases. This is the Passion in Paris eyeshadow palette. Super beautiful packaging, and this color story is also very beautiful, and it's definitely giving like Paris color vibes. Especially I feel like it matches very much the color of the outside of the palette. So this one is beautiful, and from what I remember, this performed very well. So just kind of what to be expected, right, from BH Cosmetics. And then I also have the Hangin' in Hawaii palette, and here is what this one looks like. And this one is a beautiful kind of spring summer color story. And I actually remember my sister owned this palette way before I did, and I saw her eyeshadow look one day and I thought it was the most beautiful thing. And I was like, what are you wearing on your eyes? It's so pretty. And she told me that it was this palette from BH. So the moment she told me that, I had to pick this one up and own it for myself. And seriously, it doesn't disappoint. It has some of the most beautiful shimmer and lid shades in here. So definitely could never declutter these BH palettes. I also have Summer in Saint Tropez, and this one is my least favorite probably, but I also don't feel like I could get rid of this because BH is pretty much no longer, and this is a really nice summer palette to have. I feel like it's a fun way to kind of play with color, but yeah, I could never ever see myself getting rid of any of my BH Cosmetics palettes. So that is one of them. I do have one more, or two more. Give me 1 second. Okay, then we have Love in London, which is such a beloved color story in my opinion. I feel like this color story came out during a time when we had so many warm toned and neutral palettes. So the fact that this is a cool tones palette, I thought that it was such, you know, ahead of its time, if you will. This is definitely a color story that we would love and appreciate right now. So the fact that this was released well before its time definitely makes me very sad, but also just very happy that I have this beautiful color story in my collection. And this was such a great formula from BH Cosmetics. So that is Love in London. And then my last BH Cosmetics palette is actually the Avocado Toast palette, and this one is so stunning. If you love green eyeshadow, this one would have been perfect for you. And again, this one performs so well. So I could also never part from this palette. So BH Cosmetics, I really, really hope that we get a little bit of your formula within Makeup Revolution, but I could never ever declutter these from my collection. Okay, then of course, this is the only Natasha Denona that I'm actually going to mention because I really do feel that this palette deserves to be spoken about, and it is the Natasha Denona Biba palette. You guys know how much I loved and adored this palette, but the reason I would never declutter like this exact palette is because my husband actually bought this palette for me. So this was back in 2019. I had never tried Natasha Denona. I think I had like the mini Lila from her, but I was very, very unimpressed with that formula. But I just knew that her formula was good because I had heard nothing but good things. And so I just asked my husband over and over again if I could basically try out this palette because this was the palette that I wanted to try from her. And I remember we went into Sephora together and I swatched it and I just contemplated over and over again on whether or not I wanted to get it and like pull the plunge or pull the trigger, what have you. And so I finally did it, and it's so sad how old this is, but I could never ever declutter this palette. I mean, it is so, so good, and I love the matte. I really wish that she would come out with another like all matte palette because I do feel like the mattes in this palette are what makes this palette so special. And unfortunately, I have a fear that she's going to discontinue this because I want to say this is only available on her website. So I feel like I have to pick up a backup or at least make sure that I'm getting lots of use out of this one. But I just remember how much I loved this palette, and I also remembered that because she has those really beautiful cream to powder formulas, I remember thinking that her quality was so bad, but it actually made me realize that I had to come up with a different technique on how to apply my eyeshadow. And I feel like Natasha Denona's formula pushed me to kind of get out of my comfort zone a little bit and learn new techniques when it came to eyeshadow, especially when blending eyeshadow. And I feel like that really helped me get better at putting on eyeshadow. So I love this formula so much, and the Biba palette will always hold such a special place in my heart because my husband was with me when we picked this one up. Okay, and then finally, I will never ever declutter my Pat McGrath motherships. I will never. I have 3 of them. And I am such a terrible person. I never use them. Isn't that so terrible? I feel like I'm doing that thing where I reserve them to not use them and then they go to waste. But this is Moonlit Seduction. I do still have them in their original packaging, and I need to use this. It is so, so beautiful. Like, it is absolutely stunning. I remember whenever this first came out and I was blown away at how beautiful it is. The special shades in here are so stunning. So maybe I will play around with this one for Christmas Eve, maybe, I don't know, but super beautiful. I could never ever declutter this one. And then I have this one, which was actually my very first mothership palette. This is the Utopian Dream. Super, super stunning. And this one will also always be very special to me because I actually wore this one on my graduation for my master's. So I remember this was actually like my gift to myself for getting my master's, and this was the palette that I wore on my eyes. It is just so beautiful. These special shades, again, are just kind of unreal, to be honest. So I could never declutter this. I love opening them up and just like looking at them and just like adoring them and then getting upset that I don't use them. So I need to change that in 2025. I need to like always have one of these pulled into like my eyeshadow palette basket or something because these are just too good to sit in the drawers. You know what I mean? So really, really love Utopian Dream. And then my final one, which is definitely a classic, is Bronze Seduction. And I feel like this one was very, very popular from her years back. I feel like this was the mothership that a lot of people wanted. And so this one I feel like is very beautiful for more neutral looks. It's definitely more warms toned, but I do feel like you can get a beautiful neutral look. And then this topper shade is so beautiful. So I do feel like I need to play around with this one so much more as well. So those are all of the palettes that I can never declutter, whether it's for nostalgic reasons or whether it's because they hold a very special place in my heart, sentimental value, all of the things. I could never declutter these. And I wanted to talk about palettes that maybe you wouldn't think about when I say that I could never declutter them, because again, it's very obvious that I would never declutter my Natasha Denona palette or my indie palettes. So anyways, what palettes would you never declutter? Like absolutely not. Like you would save them if your house is burning down type situation. So please let me know. I would love to know what your top palettes are and which ones you would never get rid of. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, I would love for you to subscribe and be a part of my YouTube channel family here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye.